Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said Russia's war on his country will end sooner than it otherwise would have done with Donald Trump's return to the White House. Mr. Zelensky didn't say whether the president-elect had made any demands about talks with Russia. It comes as Ukraine also accused Germany of attempting to appease Russia after the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz spoke on the phone to Vladimir Putin for the first time in 2 years. Mr. Scholz said he urged President Putin to begin talks with Ukraine to achieve a just peace. Zelensky said the call undermined efforts to isolate Russia. Let's get more on President Zelensky's comments regarding a Trump administration on the war in Ukraine.
Ми великий народ, і ми повинні це довести.
We are a great nation, and we have to prove it. Therefore, I believe that the war will end. There is no exact date, but for sure, I emphasize once again, with the policy of this team that will now lead the White House, the war will end faster. This is their approach. This is their promise to their society, and it is also very important for them, not only for the sake of Ukraine.
Well, Robert English is a former Pentagon policy analyst who is now co-director of Central European Studies at the University of Southern California. I asked him what he read into President Zelensky's comments about the Trump administration being able to end the conflict with Russia sooner than previously thought possible.
Well, it's simply a frank admission that Trump wants it to end soon, and that implicitly Trump will cut off aid at some point in the not too distant future, and he will force the parties to the table, at least the Ukrainians, into concessions to Russia. So it's a desperate situation for Ukraine, and Zelensky just frankly admitted what we all know, what we can all see with the election of Donald Trump.
So is your analysis that Ukraine will be forced to concede land to Russia that it has gained?
Yes, that is pretty clear. You know, just today I was at an all-day conference on Western support and the future of the Ukraine conflict, including defense and State Department people. And frankly, off the record, but very frankly, they all admit they expect under Trump that not only will there be forced concessions of territory, but that the West will probably push Zelensky, the West itself will concede, at least for a period of 10 or 15 years, neutrality, no NATO for Ukraine. That may be revisited in the distant future, but that's another key concession to Vladimir Putin.
And what do you think Putin will be satisfied with? How much land will he insist on taking?
Probably something like what he has now. He may, of course, ask for more because Russia has formally annexed those four Ukrainian regions, of which he only holds about 80%. And it may be that he demands that he get the other 20%. This is what we'll be bargaining over in all likelihood. The West will not want to. Certainly Ukraine doesn't want to give up any territory. But it's hard to see what cards the West holds, because in this situation, Ukraine's army is retreating faster than it has any time previously, except at the outset of war. The Russians are advancing steadily. Ukraine is also experiencing high rates of desertion. I wouldn't quite say the army is crumbling, but in some places it looks like that with this rapid retreat. So what cards does the West hold? There's no more escalation they can threaten that has any meaning. And all around Europe, countries are demanding of their leaders to reduce aid and end this war. And that's why it was interesting to see Chancellor Scholz as the envoy of the West going to Putin, because he's in one of the weakest situations of all, with his government collapsing and the opposition demanding peace talks. It's hard to imagine going to Russia with a weaker hand than we are in Chancellor Scholz.
Yeah, and yet President Zelensky was critical of Chancellor Scholz, saying that it's his engaging with President Putin has opened up a Pandora's box. He wants to retain this isolationist approach to Russia, doesn't he?
Yes, but again, that's impossible when on the one hand, Trump is insisting that the war ends soon. He's going to cut off aid, and that won't happen without talks. So somebody had to go and knock on Putin's door, and Chancellor Scholz got that unpleasant job. It's not really his fault. It's the fault of the combined West that cannot seem to support Ukraine in any meaningful way that would change this outcome. It's been nearly 3 years, and the public demands all over Europe, Central Europe, Western Europe, and of course with Trump's election in the US, have undermined the pro-Ukrainian forces, and now it's time to, sue for peace.
Robert English there. Well, in the past few minutes, the Reuters news agency has reported some comments from President Zelensky saying, from our side, we must do everything to ensure this war next year ends in a diplomatic manner, and also said that it is in Putin's interest to sit down and negotiate, but not to agree on anything. And he also says that the battlefield situation in eastern Ukraine is difficult.